The sun was low over the Arizona hills, turning the sky soft orange as Clara Walker dragged another bundle of firewood toward her cabin. Winter had come early that year, and the nights were colder than anything she had faced alone. She had been working since morning, her hands hurting, her back stiff, and her breath visible in the air. Still, she kept pushing herself, because if she did not finish before dark, she would have no warmth for the night. Her small homestead sat near the trees, far from town. Clara had been alone for months after her husband passed. She had learned to mend fences, feed livestock, and cut wood by herself. But some days, the work felt heavier than her body could carry. Her heart was tired, and so were her hands. She bent down to lift a large pile of logs she had chopped earlier. When she pulled them up, the weight shifted wrong, and the bundle slipped from her arms, crashing onto the ground. The sound echoed through the quiet land. Clara stared at the scattered logs, her chest tightening. She had already dropped the wood twice that day, and each time reminded her of how hard living alone had become. She bent again to pick them up, but her fingers trembled, and her strength faded. She sat back on her heels, leaned forward, and whispered to herself, barely loud enough for anyone to hear, "It's too hard. Too much for me." She thought she was alone. She usually was. But that day, she wasn't. Not far away, an Apache man named Tahoma was walking along the riverbank, searching for herbs used to treat winter coughs. His tribe had traveled through the area for generations, and he often passed near the settlers' lands, though he rarely approached them. People kept distance, and so did he. But when he heard a soft voice carried by the wind, tired and full of strain, he paused. He looked across the open space and saw a woman kneeling beside a fallen bundle of wood. She was struggling. Not because she was weak, but because she had clearly been working for hours. Her shoulders were tense, her hair tied back roughly, and her clothes showed signs of long days of labor. Tahoma watched for a moment. He never interfered without reason, but he could not walk away from someone clearly overwhelmed. He approached slowly, making sure she could see him before he came too close. Clara turned her head when she heard footsteps on dry leaves. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw him standing a few yards away. It was unusual for anyone to appear on her property, especially an Apache man she had never met. Still, his posture was calm, his hands by his sides, no threat in his expression. Clara stood up, brushing dirt from her skirt, unsure what to say. "I didn't mean to startle you," Tahoma said gently. "I heard you. Are you hurt?" She hesitated. Part of her wanted to say she was fine, the way she normally did when neighbors stopped by, but she could not hide her exhaustion today. "No. Just tired," she said quietly. "This wood is heavier than I thought." Tahoma looked at the scattered logs. "You have been working a long time," he said. It wasn't a question, just an observation. But somehow it felt comforting. Clara tried once more to lift the bundle. Tahoma watched her grip the wood with shaking hands. She pulled, but her arms slipped again, and she almost lost her balance. She let out a frustrated sigh. Very softly, in a tone meant only to guide and not to judge, he said, "Then, use both hands. Hold it closer to your chest. The weight stays steady." Clara blinked at him, surprised at how simple his advice sounded. She crouched again, placed both hands under the logs, and pulled them closer to her body. This time, the wood lifted more smoothly. Her legs still shook, but she managed to hold it. "You see?" Tahoma said. "Balance is more important than strength." Clara almost smiled, just a tiny one, because it had been a long time since anyone had explained something to her without making her feel foolish. She carried the wood to the stack near her cabin and set it down carefully. "Thank you," she said softly, wiping her forehead. "I guess I was doing it wrong." "You're doing the work alone," Tahoma replied. "It is easy to forget small things when there is no one around to help." Clara nodded. She felt a strange relief just hearing someone admit that her burden was real. She studied him for a moment. He looked calm, steady, with deep brown eyes that carried a sense of patience she rarely saw in anyone. "I'm Clara," she said finally. "Tahoma," he replied with a slight nod. They stood quietly for a moment, neither rushing the silence. Clara felt unsure whether she should ask him to leave or ask him for help, but he made the decision easier for her. "I can help you finish the rest," he offered calmly. "If you want it." Part of Clara's pride protested. She had tried so hard to learn how to manage everything on her own. But her tired arms and aching back told her that refusing help today would only make things worse later. She nodded once. He did not take over the task completely. Instead, he walked beside her, picking up heavy logs only when she paused or stumbled. He taught her how to place her feet before lifting, how to brace her back, and how to stack the wood so it wouldn't slide off. His movements were practiced, almost effortless, but he never made her feel slow or clumsy. He let her work at her own pace. Clara realized she felt strangely at ease. She wasn't used to silence shared with another person, but Tahoma's quiet presence felt grounding rather than uncomfortable. He spoke only when needed, and never stepped too close, giving her room to move freely. By the time the sky darkened, the large stack of firewood near her cabin was complete. Clara looked at it with a mix of relief and disbelief. She had spent 2 weeks worrying she wouldn't manage this alone. Yet now it was done. She rubbed her sore hands together, feeling warmth return to her chest, not from the firewood, but from the simple experience of not facing everything by herself. "You must have your own tasks," she said, feeling guilty for taking his time. "Winter is coming for all of us," Tahoma answered. "Helping you helps the land too." Clara didn't fully understand what he meant, but the words felt sincere and respectful. She walked him toward the edge of her property. The evening wind carried the scent of pine and cold earth. "Thank you again," she said, her voice softer than before. I didn't expect anyone to pass by today." I did not expect to stop," he replied. "But some things call for it." Clara felt her cheeks warm not from embarrassment but from the rare feeling of being noticed in a kind way. She had spent too many months speaking only to herself, working until her hands shook, and trying not to break under the weight of loneliness. Today had been different, even if only for a few hours. As Tahoma turned to leave, Clara felt a small tightening in her chest, as if she didn't want the moment to end so quickly. But she stayed polite and gave him a gentle nod. "Safe travels," she said. He nodded back. "Rest well. You worked hard today, both hands and heart." Clara watched him disappear into the trees. She stood quietly for a long moment, thinking about how easily she had whispered her struggle into the open air, not knowing someone would hear, and how that small moment had brought her unexpected help and a calm voice that reminded her she wasn't as alone as she believed. Inside her cabin later that night, she looked at the tall stack of firewood and felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in months. She didn't know if she would see Tahoma again, but something about the day stayed with her. The way he didn't judge her weakness, the way he guided her gently, and the way his presence made the cold world feel a little warmer. For the first time in a long time, Clara drifted to sleep not thinking about what she had lost, but about the small, steady help she had received from a stranger who treated her not as someone helpless, but as someone still capable, just needing both hands to lift what felt too heavy. The next few days passed quietly for Clara. She went about her chores, feeding the horses, clearing snow from the doorstep, checking the chicken coop, but something felt different in her routine. It was as if the silence around her cabin was not as heavy as before. She kept replaying the memory of Tahoma helping her with the firewood, the calm way he spoke, the patience in his tone, and the way he never made her feel embarrassed for struggling. She didn't expect to see him again. People in the frontier came and went, and she had learned long ago not to build hopes around things she couldn't control. But she could not stop glancing toward the river every time she stepped outside, wondering if he might appear the way he had before, quiet, respectful, and steady. 3 days after their meeting, Clara was checking the fence near the back of her property. The winter winds had pushed some posts sideways, and she didn't want the animals wandering off. As she lifted one of the heavy posts, she heard soft footsteps on the cold ground. Her heart jumped a little, because those steps were slow and careful, the same pattern she remembered. When she turned, She saw Tahoma walking toward her with a bundle of dried herbs tied neatly with twine. He didn't wave or call out, he simply approached in a calm and open way that let her know he meant no harm. "You're working again," he said in a gentle tone. Clara brushed dirt off her hands. "Fences don't fix themselves," she replied with a small, polite smile. "But I'm managing." Tahoma glanced at the loose fence post. "It's leaning because the ground is soft from the cold," he said. "If you pack stones around the base, it will stay firm." Clara looked down at the frost-covered soil. "I never knew that. You are learning many things alone," Tahoma said. She appreciated that he didn't say it as a criticism, only as a truth. She had been trying so hard to be strong. But sometimes she felt like a child still learning how to take care of herself. She watched as he knelt, pulled a few flat stones from the ground nearby, and showed her how to wedge them around the bottom of the post. "Like this," he said, pressing the stones firmly. "Now push." Clara put both hands on the post and gave it a steady shove. It didn't move at all. "That's much better," she said, impressed. "Thank you." Tahoma stood and dusted his palms. "I brought these," he said softly, lifting the bundle of herbs. "They help with fever and with winter cough. Your cabin is far from town. It is good to keep these nearby." Clara accepted them carefully, touched by the small act. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said. "That is true," he replied, "but I wish to." They stood together in the cold morning light. A soft breeze moved through the trees, and the air smelled faintly of pine and frost. Clara felt a strange peace in his presence, something she hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. "Would you like some warm tea?" she asked carefully, not wanting to seem rude if he declined. "You must be cold walking out here." "Flecken scent," Tahoma nodded once. "Tea would be good." Inside her small cabin, Clara felt a little nervous. It had been months since anyone other than a neighbor stepped inside, and Tahoma was more of a stranger than a friend, but something about him felt safe. She lit the stove, set the kettle, and arranged the herbs he brought on the table. He looked around the cabin quietly, not judging the simple furniture or the worn blankets. Instead, he seemed to take in the space with calm curiosity. "You built this with your husband?" he asked gently. Clara nodded. "Most of it, yes. We worked on it together. After he passed, I had to manage the rest alone." She paused, tapping her fingers nervously against the kettle. "I'm still learning how to do things right." "You are doing well," he said, his voice steady. "You survived a long season alone. That is not easy." Something in the way he said it touched her deeply. Most people tried to comfort her by talking about her husband or offering pity. But Tahoma didn't speak about what she lost, he spoke about what she had endured. When the tea was ready, Clara poured 2 cups and placed one in front of him. They sat across from each other, their hands wrapped around warm mugs. For a moment, neither spoke, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural, like 2 souls resting after long days of work. "I see you at the river sometimes," Clara said finally. "Or, near the trees. I didn't know your name before. I never saw you this close." "I stay in the hills most days," he replied. "It is quiet there. My people do not pass through as often as before. I come here for herbs and water." Clara nodded slowly. "Do you always help settlers you see struggling?" "No," he said truthfully. "Many settlers prefer distance. Many do not want help." She looked down at her cup, her cheeks warming slightly. "I hope I didn't seem ungrateful." "You did not," he said. "You accepted help when you needed it. That is not weakness." She met his eyes then, and the calm in them made her realize he meant every word. His presence warmed her more than the tea. After finishing their drinks, they went outside again. Clara needed to repair another fence board, and Tahoma walked with her. He didn't take over the work. Instead, he showed her how to angle nails so the wood wouldn't split. When her hand slipped on the hammer, he said gently, "Hold it lower. It gives more control." She tried it, and it worked better. Every lesson he gave was small but meaningful. Each one reminded her how much easier life felt when someone guided her without judgment. At one point, She sighed in frustration when a stubborn nail bent sideways. "I'm trying," she murmured, "but some tasks feel too much for me." "No task is too much when learned slowly," he replied. "You are not expected to know everything at once." Clara felt something loosen inside her chest. She had put so much pressure on herself to be perfect, to prove she could live alone. But Tahoma's words reminded her that learning was a process, not a race. As the afternoon sun lowered, they finished the fence repairs. Clara wiped her forehead again, smiling softly. "Thank you," she said for the third or fourth time that day. "You teach things in a way that makes them easier." "I teach only what you are ready to learn," he replied. She wasn't sure what he meant at first, but then she understood. He never assumed she needed help. He only stepped in when she struggled, and only spoke when she seemed uncertain. His way of helping made her feel capable instead of helpless. Before leaving, Tahoma walked with her toward the barn. The horses nickered at his presence. Animals sensed calm people quickly. He checked the doors, the hay, and the water trough without being asked. He moved quietly, always aware of her space. "You live far from others," he said. "Yes," Clara answered. "It's peaceful, but also lonely at times." "If you need help," he said, "I am often near the river. You may call out, and I will hear." Clara felt warmth in her chest again. The same warmth she felt the first day they met. "I don't want to trouble you," she said softly. "It is no trouble," he answered. "Helping neighbors keeps the land safe." She nodded. "Then, I may call if something feels too difficult." He gave a small nod in return. "And you will learn each task, one by one." Clara walked him toward the edge of her land again. As he turned to leave, she found herself speaking before she could stop the words. "Will you come by again? Even if I don't call?" Tahoma paused. He looked back at her, his expression thoughtful but warm. "Yes," he said. "I will come." Clara felt a slow, steady comfort settle in her heart as she watched him disappear into the trees again. She didn't know what their connection meant yet, friendship, kindness, or something still forming, but she knew it mattered. She knew she wouldn't face the winter completely alone anymore. Inside her cabin that evening, she placed the herbs on a shelf, touched the fence post that now stood strong, and felt grateful. The world had not changed much around her, but the presence of one calm man had changed something inside her. She slept that night with a lighter spirit, knowing that someone out there, someone steady and thoughtful, had chosen to return. Winter settled deeper across the land, covering the hills and trees with a thin layer of frost. Clara woke each morning to a cold cabin, but she no longer faced the season with the same fear she once had. The stack of firewood she and Tahoma had prepared held strong, and each time she carried logs inside, she remembered how he had taught her to lift with steady hands. His calm voice still echoed in her mind whenever she started doubting herself. Days passed, and though she didn't expect it, Tahoma returned just as he said he would. Sometimes he came in the early morning, sometimes in the quiet afternoon, but never without purpose. He checked her fences, brought herbs, or helped her look at a sick chicken. He never stayed too long inside her home, never overstepped. He was simply present in the moments she needed guidance. And somehow, that made the long winter feel shorter. One cold morning, Clara stepped outside to fetch water from the well. The pump had been giving her trouble for weeks, sometimes working, sometimes refusing to budge. Today, it barely moved. She pressed her full weight against the handle, but it only squeaked and stuck in place. Her breath puffed out into the cold air as frustration grew inside her. She tried again. Nothing. The metal felt stiff with frost, and her hands, cold from working without gloves, started to ache. She whispered to herself, "Why won't anything work today?" and pushed harder until the pump groaned, refusing to cooperate. Clara stepped back, rubbing her hands together, feeling a familiar heaviness settle in her chest. Then she heard soft footsteps behind her. "You're fighting the pump," Tahoma said gently. "It will not move that way." Clara turned to see him standing a few feet away, snowflakes caught in his hair and on his shoulders. She felt a rush of relief, though she tried to hide it. I can't figure this thing out, Clara admitted, stepping aside. It keeps jamming. I've done everything I can think of. Tahoma walked closer, studying the pump. It isn't broken, he said. The handle is frozen. The ground temperature makes the pipe stiff. Clara sighed. So I'm not doing it wrong? No, he said. You just need to warm it first. He knelt beside the pump and removed a cloth from his belt, dipping it into the bucket of warm water Clara had inside the house earlier. He wrapped the damp cloth around the metal pipe. Clara watched as he pressed the cloth gently, letting the heat loosen the frozen parts. After a minute, he tested the handle, and this time it moved a little. Try now, he said. Clara stepped forward. She took hold of the handle, and with both hands, pushed it downward. The pump moved smoothly for the first time all morning, and water began to flow into the bucket. Clara smiled, wide and genuine, the kind of smile she hadn't felt in months. I can't believe warming it was all it needed. Sometimes the land asks for patience, Tahoma said, not force. She nodded slowly, thinking about how she had tried so hard to fight everything alone, winter, chores, loneliness, when maybe she just needed to learn a gentler way. She looked at him with a grateful expression. I'm sorry you keep finding me struggling with something, Clara said, half laughing. It is not shameful to learn, he replied. Every person strengthens their skills with time. 8. Clara felt warmth spread inside her chest, not from the water or the rising sun, but from his steady reassurance. She filled her bucket, and together they walked back toward the cabin. Would you like to stay for a moment? She asked. I made soup earlier. It's warm. Tahoma hesitated, not wanting her to feel obligated. Only if it is no trouble. It's not, Clara said softly. I'd like the company. Inside the cabin, Clara placed 2 bowls of soup on the table. The scent of vegetables and herbs filled the air, pushing away the morning cold. Tahoma removed snow from his coat and sat quietly across from her. They ate in peaceful silence for a while, as they often did. Neither needed to fill the air with unnecessary words. But today, Clara felt a desire to talk not because she felt lonely, but because she trusted him. You help me so much, she said. I don't understand why. You barely know me. Tahoma paused with his spoon in his hand, then said, I help because you try. Many people give up when life is heavy. But you push forward. Even when your hands shake. Clara lowered her gaze. Sometimes I don't feel strong. Strength isn't loud, he replied. It is quiet. It shows in the way a person continues, even when the world feels too big. Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. Not sadness, just a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. Being seen. Understood. After they finished eating, Tahoma stood up. I will check the barn before I go, he said. The cold is hard on animals. Clara followed him outside. The snow had started falling again, drifting softly across the land. They reached the barn, and Tahoma inspected the beams, the hay, and the water trough. Your roof is leaking, he said, pointing to a thin line of moisture above the stalls. Clara groaned softly. Another thing I have to learn how to fix. I will show you, Tahoma said. But today, the wood is too wet. We fix it when weather is calm. Clara nodded, relieved she wouldn't face it alone. As they walked back toward the cabin, the snowflakes fell thicker, brushing against Clara's face and settling in her hair. Tahoma glanced at the sky. Storm is coming, he said. Should you go before it gets worse? Clara asked. I will, but only when you are ready, he answered. Those words surprised her. Ready for what? For the day, he said simply. I don't leave until I know your tasks are done. A quiet warmth filled Clara's heart, unexpected but welcome. She finished her chores with him nearby, feeding chickens, breaking ice for the horses' water, and stacking more wood inside. Each task felt easier with him close, even when he didn't help directly. His calm presence made the world feel manageable. When everything was done, Tahoma prepared to leave. Clara walked with him to the edge of her land again. The snow crunched softly beneath their boots. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I know I say it often, but I truly mean it every time." "You learn quickly," he said. "You will not need help forever." Clara looked down at her gloves. "Maybe not, but I appreciate it now." Tahoma nodded. "I will come again after the storm." As he turned to leave, Clara felt a gentle pull inside her chest, the kind she didn't have words for, the kind she didn't fully understand. She watched him disappear through the snowy trees until he was completely gone. Back inside her cabin, she stood by the window, looking at the drifting snow. She thought about the pump, the warm soup, the quiet encouragement he gave her. Trust had grown between them, slowly and naturally, like a seed pushing through cold soil. She didn't know where this connection was leading, but she knew it was real. She knew his presence had changed her winter not by solving her problems, but by helping her believe she could solve them herself. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like the world was pressing down on her. And as the storm began to build outside, Clara whispered to herself with newfound strength, "I can handle this." Because she wasn't alone anymore, not in the way that mattered most. The storm lasted for 3 long days. Snow piled against the door of Clara's cabin, and the wind howled through the trees like a living thing searching for shelter. Clara stayed inside, feeding the fire every few hours and checking the animals whenever the wind calmed for a moment. She tried to stay positive, repeating the lessons Tahoma had taught her about patience, balance, and steady hands. Still, by the second night, she felt drained. The sickness began quietly, a small cough, a strange weakness in her legs, and a heat rising across her face. She blamed exhaustion at first, telling herself she just needed rest, but by the morning of the 3rd day, the fever had grown stronger. Her head felt light, her throat dry, and every step across the cabin floor made her dizzy. She tried to go outside to check the horses, but the cold air hit her chest so sharply she had to lean against the doorway just to breathe. She wrapped her shawl tighter and returned inside, hoping her body would recover if she rested. She didn't expect anyone to come. The snow was too deep, and the wind too harsh, but Tahoma came anyway. He had been watching the storm from the hills, waiting for a break. When the wind slowed just enough, he made his way through the trees toward Clara's cabin. He knew storms like this were dangerous, especially for someone living alone so far from town. He didn't worry constantly, but he listened to the land, and something inside him felt uneasy. When he reached the edge of her property, he saw that the snow around her cabin was untouched. No footprints. No sign that she had been outside. His concern grew. He approached the barn first, checking the animals. The horses were restless, their water frozen. He broke the ice gently, speaking softly to calm them. After that, he walked toward the cabin door and tapped his knuckles lightly against the wood. "Clara," he called. "Are you well?" There was no answer. The silence made him frown. He knocked again, louder this time. "Clara?" Inside, Clara heard something faint but couldn't gather the strength to move quickly. She tried to stand, but the fever made her knees unstable. She reached the door with slow, heavy steps and opened it only halfway. When she saw Tahoma standing there, covered in snow but steady as always, relief washed over her so strongly she almost fell forward. "You do not look well," he said immediately, noticing her pale face and tired eyes. "I'm just a little weak," Clara whispered. "The storm kept me inside. I think I caught a fever." Tahoma stepped inside without hesitation, but carefully, as if afraid she might lose her balance. He guided her toward the chair, near the fire, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "Sit. You shouldn't be walking." Clara lowered herself into the chair, shivering even though the fire burned bright. Her hands trembled as she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Tahoma knelt beside her and placed the back of his hand lightly against her forehead. His brow tightened. "You're burning with fever," he said. "You should have called for help." Clara gave a weak laugh. "In this storm, no one would have heard me." "I would have," he said quietly. Those simple words made her chest feel warm. She didn't know what to say. so she closed her eyes instead. Tahoma moved quickly but with purpose. He filled a pot with snow and placed it on the stove to melt. He added the herbs he had brought earlier in the season, the ones meant for fevers. While the mixture warmed, he stepped outside again to bring more firewood inside. Clara tried to protest, but she didn't have the strength to argue. He placed a fresh log on the fire, then knelt beside her again. "Drink this when it cools a little," he said, handing her the warm herbal mixture. "It will help." Clara sipped slowly, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Her breathing eased a little, but she still felt weak and heavy, like her body was fighting something she couldn't see. "You should rest," Tahoma said. "I'll stay nearby." Clara opened her eyes slowly. "You don't have to stay. The storm." "I know the storm," he said gently. "I also know when a person shouldn't be alone." Clara had no strength left to argue. And even if she did, she wouldn't have wanted him to leave. She leaned her head back against the chair and let her eyes close. Tahoma didn't sit inside her cabin without purpose. He worked quietly, checking the fire, making sure the kettle stayed warm, and stepping out occasionally to bring in more wood or to check that the snow wasn't blocking the door. He didn't hover, but he didn't leave her unprotected either. His presence was steady, like a strong tree rooted in the middle of a storm. Clara drifted in and out of sleep. Each time she opened her eyes, she saw Tahoma nearby, either tending the fire or sitting silently, watching over her without looking intrusive. His calm made her feel safe. For the first time in days, her fear eased. At one point, nearing evening, Clara tried to stand again. "I need to check the barn," she said faintly. "You need to rest," Tahoma replied, placing a gentle hand in the air, not touching her, but urging her without force. "I've checked everything. The horses are well." Clara sighed softly and sat back down. "You've done so much," she whispered. "It is what neighbors do," he said. "You helped me when you accepted my presence. I help because I choose to. I help because I choose to." She closed her eyes again, feeling tears she didn't expect gathering near her lashes. She wasn't crying from pain, she was crying from the feeling of not being alone after so long. But the tears stayed unfallen. Night came. The wind softened. Clara's fever lowered little by little. Tahoma stayed awake through most of the night, making sure the fire didn't die and that she had enough blankets. He moved with quiet care, letting her sleep in peace. When morning light finally came through the small window, Clara woke with more strength. Her fever had eased. Her head felt clearer. She sat up slowly, and Tahoma looked at her with relief in his expression. "You're better," he said. Clara nodded. "Thanks to you. I brought herbs," he replied simply. "But your body did the rest." She smiled softly. "I'm glad you came. I told you I would," he said. Clara studied him for a moment. The calm in his eyes, the steadiness of his voice, the way he had stayed through the storm, it all made her realize how rare his presence truly was. Not many people would have walked through the snow for her. Not many would have cared this deeply about someone they barely knew. "Tahoma," she said quietly, "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," he replied, "by healing." Clara held his gaze for a long moment. She didn't say anything else, but something warm passed between them. An understanding. A connection deeper than words. By midday, the storm had cleared enough for him to return to the hills. Before leaving, he looked around the cabin one more time, making sure she had everything she needed. "I'll return tomorrow," he said, "to check the roof and bring more herbs." Clara felt a gentle flutter in her chest. "I'll be here." Tahoma stepped outside, and for the first time since the storm began, sunlight glistened on the snow. Clara watched him walk across her land, steady and calm as always. She felt stronger, not just in her body, but in her spirit. She wasn't alone anymore, not in her struggles, not in her fears, not in her quiet winter days. Someone had stood outside her cabin, braving the storm for her. Someone had chosen to help when she could not stand on her own. And that choice changed everything. Spring arrived slowly, as if the land had been asleep for too long. and needed time to stretch awake. The snow melted little by little, revealing patches of earth, small hints of green, and the promise of new life. Clara stepped outside one morning and breathed in the softer air. For the first time in months, she didn't feel cold in her bones or fear in her heart. The world felt lighter. Her strength had returned fully after the fever. She moved around her land with a confidence she hadn't felt since before winter. She fixed small things, cleaned the yard, prepared the garden soil, and tended to the animals. But she didn't do it alone anymore, not in the way she once did, because Tahoma continued visiting her, not out of obligation, but out of choice. Some days he came to help repair the roof. Other days, to check the well, or bring dried herbs. Sometimes he walked up quietly just to make sure she was safe, and sometimes they simply talked. Their connection had grown naturally, like a plant finding sunlight through cold soil. On one warm afternoon, Clara waited outside near the garden she was preparing. She had tools laid out: a hoe, a shovel, and a small basket of seeds she hoped to plant by the end of the week. She wasn't as skilled at planting as she was with caring for animals. But she wanted to learn, and she hoped, silently, that Tahoma would come today. He arrived just as the breeze picked up, moving toward her from the trees with his usual calm steps. Clara looked up, and a soft smile spread across her face before she could stop herself. "You came," she said. "I said I would," Tahoma replied, his voice warm. She noticed he carried something wrapped in cloth. "What's that?" "Seeds," he said, handing her the bundle. "Plants that grow strong even in dry seasons. Good for food. Good for trade." Clara opened the cloth carefully and saw the seeds inside. She looked up at him with a grateful expression. "You brought these for me?" "For us," he said softly. "If you wish to plant together." Clara felt warmth bloom inside her chest. She nodded, unable to hide her happiness. "I'd like that." They walked to the garden patch. Clara knelt in the soil and dug small holes with her hands. Tahoma knelt beside her, showing her how deep to place each seed, how to space them, and how to cover them gently. "Plants grow well with patience," he said. "Too much water drowns them. Too little leaves them weak." "Like people?" Clara asked with a small smile. He looked at her thoughtfully. "Yes," he said. "Like people." They worked side by side, the sun warming their backs. Clara felt peaceful, almost joyful. She couldn't remember the last time she had shared such quiet, meaningful work with someone. She watched Tahoma's hands steady, sure, gentle with the soil, and thought about all the ways he had helped her since the first day he heard her soft whisper by the firewood pile. When the seeds were planted, they sat on the edge of the garden bed. The breeze carried the scent of pine and new earth. Clara let out a satisfied sigh. "I never imagined spring could feel so good," she said. "Winter was long," Tahoma said. "But you faced it well." "I didn't face it alone," she replied, looking at him with gratitude. He didn't answer immediately, but his expression softened. Later, they walked around her land, checking the fences and the barn. The horses whinnied when Tahoma approached. They had grown used to him and felt calm around his presence. Clara watched how gently he moved around the animals, how he spoke to them in a soft tone even though they didn't understand the words. Compassion seemed woven into his character. After finishing the chores, they returned to the cabin. Clara offered him water, and they sat outside on 2 wooden chairs near the door. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and amber. It was the same sky where everything had begun. Months ago, when she was struggling with firewood and he had appeared like an unexpected answer. Inside her heart, something shifted. She was no longer afraid of being alone, but she was no longer alone. That made everything different. After a quiet moment, Tahoma spoke. "You have grown strong," he said. "Stronger than when we first met." Clara smiled softly. "Because of your help." "Because of your will," he corrected. "You chose to learn. You chose to keep trying." Clara looked down at her hands, remembering the cold days when she believed she couldn't survive the winter. Now her hands felt capable. Her spirit felt steady. You know, she began, then paused to gather courage. Some people come into your life when you least expect it, and they change everything. You did that for me. Tahoma listened quietly but deeply. You helped my land, she said. But you also helped me. I was losing hope. I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it. Then you arrived, and little by little, the world became less heavy. Tahoma's eyes softened, touched by her honesty. You were carrying too much alone, he said. Anyone would feel tired. Clara nodded, holding his gaze. I don't want to go back to being alone like that. You don't have to, he said in a gentle voice. A soft breeze moved between them. The moment felt full, not loud or dramatic, but warm and steady. Like everything that had passed between them since the beginning. Tahoma stood and looked toward the hills. My people move with the seasons, he said. But I have stayed longer this time. Clara stood too, her heart tightening. Will you leave? He turned to her. Not if you wish me to stay. Clara didn't hesitate. I do. He stepped closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance in a respectful, measured way. The late sunlight reflected in his eyes, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who had survived the winter by sharing burdens and quiet strength. I stayed because I wished to help, he said softly. But I return because I feel peace here. Clara felt something gentle settle inside her chest, something hopeful, warm, and steady. I feel the same, she whispered. They didn't need grand gestures or loud promises. Their bond had been built slowly, through shared work, shared silence, and shared survival. Tahoma placed a hand lightly over his heart. Then I will stay, he said. With your permission. Clara breathed out a long, grateful sigh. You have it. Dusk deepened, and together they walked toward the newly planted garden. The soil was dark and rich, waiting for life to grow. Clara knelt beside the garden bed and touched the earth. These plants will grow strong, she said. Yes, Tahoma agreed, because they were planted with care. Clara looked up at him with a warm smile. Like us. Tahoma returned her smile, a gentle, rare smile that held more meaning than words could shape. As night settled, Clara lit a lantern near the porch. The soft glow rested over the garden, over the chairs, over the land they now tended together. She felt a peace she hadn't known in years, a sense of belonging she thought she'd lost forever. The long winter had taken much from her, but it had also given her something new. A companion, a teacher, a quiet strength beside her. And now, with spring promising new beginnings, she knew her life was no longer a story of struggle alone. It was a story of two lives growing together slowly, steadily, like seeds pushing through warm soil. And Clara, standing beside Tahoma under the peaceful evening sky, knew she would never face another season without someone who cared enough to return.